I stood outside the hospital room, tears streaming down my face as my daughter-in-law blocked the door. "You're not welcome here," she hissed. My son wouldn't even look at me. Then the nurse approached and said something that changed everything. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Peterson, and I'm 68 years old. I never imagined that the happiest day of my life would turn into the most humiliating moment I'd ever experienced. Standing in that cold hospital hallway, clutching a hand-knitted baby blanket and wilted flowers, I felt invisible, erased. Like everything I'd done for the past 40 years meant absolutely nothing. Let me tell you who I was before that devastating day. I wasn't rich. I wasn't powerful. I was just a mother who loved her son more than life itself. My husband Robert passed away 10 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was only 62. We'd planned to travel the world in retirement, to finally enjoy the life we'd worked so hard to build. Instead, I buried him on a rainy Tuesday morning and came home to an empty house that echoed with memories. But I had David, my beautiful boy, my only child. And after Robert died, David became my entire world. I poured everything I had into making sure he succeeded. When he got accepted to State University, I worked 2 jobs to pay his tuition. I was a checkout clerk at the grocery store during the day and a waitress at Denny's 3 nights a week. My feet ached constantly. I lived on 4 hours of sleep. But every time David called home excited about a class or a new opportunity, it was worth it. I wasn't the type of mother who smothered or demanded attention. I gave David space to grow. I encouraged him to be independent. When he graduated and started his own marketing business, I was so proud I cried for hours. And when he asked me for help with the down payment on his office building, I didn't hesitate. I sold the house Robert and I had spent 30 years paying off. Our dream home with the garden I'd cultivated and the porch where we'd grown old together. I sold it all and gave David $200,000. "Mom, I'll pay you back," he promised, hugging me tight. "This is going to change everything." I moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment across town. I didn't mind. Mother's sacrifice, that's what we do. I kept myself busy volunteering at St. Mary's Church, tending to my little balcony garden, and cooking Sunday dinners whenever David and his wife Jessica could visit. I wasn't lonely. I had my routines, my friends from the church group, and my weekly calls with David. When David told me Jessica was pregnant, I thought my heart would explode with joy. A grandchild, a baby to love and spoil and pass on Robert's stories to. I immediately started knitting blankets, reading parenting books, and setting up a small nursery corner in my apartment. I bought a beautiful rocking chair at an estate sale and refinished it myself. I already knew I wanted to be called Grammy. I had it all planned out. Everyone in the neighborhood knew me as the sweet lady in apartment 3B, who always had cookies for the kids and helped elderly Mrs. Chen carry her groceries. I'd lived a quiet, humble life, built on kindness and family. I thought that meant something. I thought love and sacrifice would be enough. I was wrong. And standing outside that hospital room, hearing my daughter-in-law tell me I wasn't welcome to meet my own grandson, I realized just how wrong I'd been about everything. Life before everything fell apart was simple, but it was mine. Every morning I woke up at 6:30, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat on my small balcony watching the sun rise over the neighborhood. I'd planted tomatoes, basil, and marigolds in pots along the railing. It wasn't the sprawling garden I'd had at my old house, but it brought me peace. I'd talk to the plants the way Robert used to laugh at me for doing. "Good morning, ladies," I'd say, watering each one carefully. "Let's have a beautiful day." After my coffee, I'd take a walk around the block. Mrs. Chen from apartment 2A would usually be heading to the market, and I'd offer to carry her bags when she returned. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I volunteered at St. Mary's Church, helping organize the food pantry and sometimes playing piano for the children's choir practice. The kids called me Miss Maggie. They'd show me their drawings and tell me about their school days. It filled something in me that had been empty since David grew up. My apartment was cozy. I decorated it with photos of David at every age. David's first birthday, David at his high school graduation, David and Jessica's wedding day, where I'd worn a lavender dress and cried happy tears. I'd created a small corner near the window specifically for my future grandchild. The refinished rocking chair sat there waiting. I'd folded the baby blankets I'd knitted and stacked them neatly in a wicker basket, soft yellow and mint green, gender-neutral colors. I didn't know yet if the baby would be a boy or girl, but I didn't care. I just wanted to hold that precious child. Every Sunday, I'd cook a big dinner and invite David and Jessica over. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, Robert's favorite. Homemade apple pie. I'd set the table with my good dishes, the ones with the blue flowers around the edges. Jessica didn't come every week. She'd often text saying she was too tired or had other plans. But David would stop by, and we'd sit at my little dining table talking about his business, his dreams, his excitement about becoming a father. "Mom, you're going to be the best grandmother," he told me one evening, his eyes bright with excitement. "This kid is so lucky to have you." I squeezed his hand. "I can't wait, sweetheart. I've been practicing my lullabies." He laughed. "You still remember the one you sang to me?" "Every single word," I said softly. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." We'd sat there in comfortable silence, and I remember thinking how blessed I was. My son was successful, married, and about to make me a grandmother. What more could I ask for? In the evenings, David and I would talk on the phone, sometimes for an hour, sometimes just 10 minutes. He'd tell me about a difficult client or a new contract he'd landed. I'd tell him about Mrs. Chen's grandson visiting from California or the new recipe I'd tried. Our conversations were easy, filled with the kind of comfort that comes from years of trust and love. I'd go to bed each night, feeling content. I'd read for a while, usually a mystery novel or a parenting book about grandmothering. I'd marked up an entire chapter about developmental milestones. I wanted to be prepared, helpful, the kind of grandmother every child deserved. I never imagined that this peaceful, simple life was about to be shattered. I never saw the storm coming. If I had known what Jessica was planning, maybe I could have protected myself. But I trusted them completely, and that trust would cost me everything. The first crack in my perfect world appeared about 6 months into Jessica's pregnancy. It was subtle, so subtle I almost missed it. I called Jessica on a Tuesday afternoon to ask how she was feeling and if she needed anything from the store. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I didn't think much of it. Pregnant women get tired. I left a cheerful message telling her I loved her and to call me back when she had a chance. She didn't call back that day, or the next, or the one after that. When I finally reached her 3 days later, her voice was cold, clipped. "Hi, Margaret. I'm fine. Just tired. I need to go." Click. The conversation lasted maybe 20 seconds. I stared at my phone, confused. Had I done something wrong? I replayed our last conversation in my mind. We'd talked about baby names. She'd seemed happy. What changed? I decided to give her space. Pregnancy hormones, I told myself. My friend Linda from church had warned me that some women get irritable during pregnancy. "Don't take it personally," she'd said. So I didn't. I waited a week before calling again. This time, David answered Jessica's phone. "Mom, hey, Jessica's resting. Can I have her call you back?" "Of course, sweetheart. I just wanted to check on her, and I was thinking maybe I could throw a baby shower. I know some lovely—" "Mom, that's really nice. But Jessica's mom already planned one. It's all taken care of." My heart sank a little. "Oh, well, I'd love to help. I could make the cake or—" "It's handled, Mom. Really. Jessica has it all under control." There was something in his voice, a distance I'd never heard before, like he was reading from a script, saying the right words but meaning something else entirely. "David, is everything okay? You sound stressed." "I'm fine. Just busy with work. I should go. Love you." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, a strange, hollow feeling growing in my chest. Something was off. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it deep in my bones. 2 weeks later, I decided to drop by their house with homemade chicken soup. Jessica had mentioned having morning sickness, and soup always helped when I was pregnant with David. I knocked on the door, holding the warm container carefully. I heard footsteps inside, then a long pause before the door cracked open just a few inches. Jessica's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were flat, emotionless. "Oh, Margaret. Hi." "Hi, sweetheart. I brought you some soup, my special recipe. I thought it might help with the nausea." I tried to hand her the container, but she didn't open the door wider. "That's nice. Thanks." She took it quickly, her hand darting out like she didn't want to let me see inside. But I did see. Just for a second. Over her shoulder. Cardboard boxes stacked in the hallway, and on the side of one box, written in black marker, "Legal documents." "Jessica, are you moving? Do you need help?" "No, we're just organizing. I really need to rest now, Margaret. Thanks for the soup." The door closed in my face. I heard the deadbolt click. I stood on their porch for a full minute, staring at that closed door. Legal documents? Organizing? Why did she look at me like I was a stranger? Why wouldn't she let me inside? I walked back to my car slowly, that hollow feeling expanding into something darker. Something that felt like dread, but I shook it off. I was being paranoid, overthinking. They were just busy preparing for the baby. Still, as I drove home, I couldn't shake the image of those boxes, or the coldness in Jessica's eyes, or the way my own son had sounded like he was hiding something. Something was very, very wrong. I spent the next several days trying to convince myself I was being ridiculous, paranoid, one of those overbearing mothers everyone complains about. I sat in my apartment that night after the soup incident, talking myself down from the anxiety that had settled in my stomach like a stone. "You're overthinking this, Margaret," I said aloud to my empty living room. "Jessica is pregnant and uncomfortable. Of course she doesn't want visitors. You remember how it was. You didn't want anyone around either when you were carrying David." But that wasn't entirely true. I'd loved having Robert's mother visit. She'd rub my feet and tell me stories. Still, every woman is different. I had to respect that. I picked up my phone a dozen times to call David, then set it back down. What would I even say? "Son, your wife seemed cold when I brought her soup." How petty would that sound? How needy? I imagined Jessica rolling her eyes, telling David his mother was being clingy again. I couldn't bear the thought of becoming that kind of mother-in-law, the kind people make jokes about. At church, on Thursday, Linda noticed I was distracted during our food pantry shift. "You okay, Maggie? You've been staring at those cans for 5 minutes." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." "How's the baby planning going? You must be so excited." The question made my chest tighten. Yes, very excited. Jessica's mother is handling most of it. Linda gave me a sympathetic look. "Ah, well, that's normal for a first grandchild on the mother's side. Don't worry, once the baby comes, you'll have plenty of time to bond." Her words were meant to comfort me, but they only made me feel worse. Was I being pushed aside? No. "Stop it, Margaret. You're being oversensitive." That weekend, I decided to give them more space. I wouldn't call unless they called first. I wouldn't drop by unannounced. I'd be the perfect, respectful mother-in-law who understood boundaries. I threw myself into knitting another blanket, this one with tiny teddy bears along the border. Each stitch was a meditation, a way to quiet the worried voice in my head. David called on Sunday. My heart leaped. "Hey, Mom, how are you?" "Good. I'm so glad you called. I was just thinking about you." "Listen, Mom, I need to ask you something." His voice had that cautious tone again. "Jessica and I have been talking, and we think it might be better if we have some space while we adjust to the baby. Just at first. You know, to establish our own routine as parents." Each word felt like a small cut. "Oh, of course. I understand completely. I don't want to intrude." "It's not that you're intruding. We just need to figure things out ourselves first." Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. I was saying all the right things, being supportive, understanding. But inside, I was crumbling. Will you at least send me pictures when the baby arrives? Yeah, Mom, of course. Look, I have to go. Jessica needs me. David, wait. I love you, sweetheart. Love you too. Click. I sat holding the phone long after he hung up. This was normal, wasn't it? New parents wanting space? I was probably hovering too much, being too eager. I needed to back off, let them breathe. They'd come around once the baby was here. But at night, lying in bed, I couldn't silence the doubts. The boxes labeled legal documents, Jessica's cold stare, David's avoidance. The space they were asking for felt less like boundary setting and more like exile. No, I was being dramatic, self-pitying. They were just overwhelmed with preparing for a new baby. I needed to be patient, understanding, the perfect mother and mother-in-law. So I swallowed my fears, ignored my instincts, and waited quietly in my apartment, convincing myself that everything would be fine. I was so desperate to believe the lie that I almost missed the truth entirely. The text message arrived on a Saturday afternoon while I was watering my balcony plants. My phone chimed, and I smiled when I saw it was from Jessica's sister, Amanda. Maybe this meant things were getting better. Maybe I was, finally being included. I opened the message and my smile froze. Thanks everyone for making today so special. Baby shower pics attached. Below the message were 6 photos. I clicked on the first one, my hand beginning to tremble. There was Jessica, glowing in a pink maternity dress, surrounded by smiling women. Her mother stood beside her, holding a massive gift basket. I swiped to the next photo, Jessica's college friends, people I'd met at the wedding. Another swipe. David's co-workers from his office, including Karen, his assistant. I'd had lunch with Karen just 3 months ago. The next photo showed the decorations, beautiful blue and white balloons, a dessert table with an elaborate cake, a banner that read, "Oh baby." The venue looked like the community center near their house, the same one where I'd attended charity events. I kept swiping, my heart pounding harder with each image. Neighbors I'd introduced Jessica to when she and David first moved in. My friend Linda's daughter, who was friends with Jessica. Even Mrs. Chen's grandson, who barely knew them. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I scrolled back up to the message and saw the group text list. 23 names. I was the 24th. Amanda had added me to the thread by accident when she sent the recap message. I wasn't supposed to see this. The phone slipped from my fingers onto the balcony floor. I stood there, frozen, staring at my tomato plants, but seeing nothing. They'd thrown a baby shower, a big one. They'd invited distant acquaintances and coworkers, but not me, not the grandmother. How long had they been planning this? How many conversations had David had with me where he pretended nothing was happening? How many times had Jessica smiled at me while secretly making sure I was excluded from the biggest celebration of my future grandchild's life? I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called David. It rang 3 times, 4, 5. Please pick up. Please tell me there's an explanation. Mom. Hi. His voice was tight, nervous. David, I just got added to a group text by mistake from Jessica's sister about a baby shower. My voice cracked. A baby shower that apparently happened today. Silence. David, why wasn't I invited to my own grandchild's baby shower? Mom, listen, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Please explain to me why I had to find out from accidental photos that everyone I know was there. Everyone except me. Jessica wanted to keep it small, just close family, and Karen from your office was there, David. Mrs. Chen's grandson was there. People you barely know, but not me. I heard muffled voices in the background. Then Jessica's voice, sharp and clear. Did you tell her yet? Tell me what? My blood ran cold. Tell me what, David? What haven't you told me? Mom, I can't do this right now. We're in the middle of cleaning up. I'll call you back. His voice was strained, almost panicked. "David, please don't hang up. Just tell me what's going on. Why are you shutting me out?" "I'm not shutting you out. I have to go. I'll call you tomorrow." "David." The line went dead. I stood on my balcony, the phone pressed against my chest, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about pregnancy hormones or needing space. This was deliberate, calculated. They were pushing me out of their lives, and I didn't know why. But that phrase kept echoing in my mind. Did you tell her yet? Tell me what? What else were they hiding? David never called back the next day, or the day after that. I waited by my phone like a fool, jumping every time it buzzed, only to find spam messages or calls from the church. A week passed, then another. The silence was deafening, suffocating. I left 3 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. He didn't respond to any of them. Then, on a Wednesday morning at 6:15, my phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. I answered before the second ring. "Mom, Jessica's in labor. We're at Mercy General." His voice was rushed, distracted. "I just thought you should know." "I'm on my way," I said, already grabbing my purse. "Mom, wait, I don't think—" But I'd already hung up. I drove to the hospital with my heart hammering in my chest. This was it. The moment everything would be okay again. Once the baby arrived, they'd see how much they needed me. Jessica would understand that I was just trying to help. We'd be a family again. I'd already packed the yellow blanket I'd knitted and stopped at the hospital gift shop to buy flowers. I found David in the maternity ward waiting area, pacing back and forth with his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, his face went pale. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "What do you mean? You called me. My grandson is being born. Where else would I be?" He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from his childhood. "I just called to inform you. I didn't mean for you to come." The words hit me like a slap. "You didn't want me here. David, this is your child, my grandchild." "It's complicated, Mom. Jessica is really stressed, and I'm not here to stress her out. I'm here to support both of you." I clutched the flowers tighter. "Please, sweetheart. Let me be here for this." Before he could respond, Jessica's mother, Patricia, emerged from a hospital room down the hall. When she saw me, her expression hardened. She walked straight to David and whispered something in his ear. He nodded miserably. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Mrs. Peterson," Patricia said coldly, "Jessica has made it very clear that she doesn't want you in the delivery room. This is a private family moment." "I understand that. I'll wait out here. I just want to meet the baby when he's born." Patricia's smile was cruel. "We'll see." Hours crawled by. I sat in that uncomfortable waiting room chair, watching other families come and go. New fathers passed out cigars. Grandparents rushed in with balloons. Everyone was celebrating, and I sat alone, invisible. David avoided me, checking his phone constantly, disappearing down hallways without explanation. Finally, a nurse emerged. "The baby's here. A healthy boy, 8 pounds, 2 ounces. My heart soared. I stood up, smoothing my dress, picking up the flowers and blanket. This was it. My grandson. I walked toward the room, my eyes filling with happy tears. Then Jessica appeared in the doorway. Her hair was pulled back, her face flushed from labor, but her eyes were ice cold and focused on me. She stepped directly into my path, blocking the entrance. Behind her, I could hear the soft cries of a newborn baby. My grandson. "You're not welcome here," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. The words sucked all the air from my lungs. "Jessica, please. I just want to see him, just for a moment." "This is my family now. You need to leave." I looked past her desperately, searching for David. He was standing by the hospital bed holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blue. Our eyes met across the room. "Son?" I whispered, my voice pleading. "Please?" He looked at me for one long, terrible moment. Then he looked away. He said nothing. He did nothing. He just turned his back on me and focused on the baby in his arms. The betrayal was complete. I stood frozen in that hospital hallway, my legs refusing to move. Jessica disappeared back into the room and closed the door firmly. The click of the latch echoed like a gunshot. Through the small window, I could see David cradling the baby, Jessica's mother cooing over them both, nurses bustling around, a complete family portrait. Without me. My chest felt hollow, empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that mattered. I stumbled backward, the flowers slipping from my hands and scattering across the sterile white floor. Nobody came to help me pick them up. I needed to leave. I needed air. I turned toward the elevator, my vision blurred with tears, when I heard voices coming from around the corner. Patricia's voice, sharp and satisfied. "Yes, Barbara, it's done. The baby's here and she's gone. No, she won't be a problem anymore." I pressed myself against the wall, hidden behind a large plant near the nurse's station. I knew I shouldn't eavesdrop, but something in Patricia's tone made my blood run cold. "David signed everything last week, just like we planned," Patricia continued. "Jessica made sure of it. The property transfer, the business restructuring, all of it. Margaret has no legal claim to anything now. She's completely cut out." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. "The stupid woman signed whatever David put in front of her," Patricia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Didn't even read the documents, just trusted her precious son. Jessica said it was almost too easy." Property transfer? Business restructuring? My mind raced backward, grasping for memories. 3 months ago, David had visited with a stack of papers. "Mom, I need you to sign these, just formalities for the business restructuring. The accountant needs everything updated for tax purposes." I'd been making dinner. I'd wiped my hands on my apron and sat at the kitchen table while he flipped through the pages, showing me where to sign. "What exactly am I signing, sweetheart?" "Just boring legal stuff. Trust documents, business partnership papers, property deed updates. You know how complicated this stuff gets. My lawyer said we need everything in order before the baby comes." I'd signed every page without reading a single word. Why would I? He was my son. My David. The boy I'd raised to be honest and good. I trusted him completely. "She actually signed away her house money?" Barbara's voice came through Patricia's phone speaker, shocked. "All 200,000? "Not exactly," Patricia replied. She'd already given David that money for his business down payment, but the papers she signed removed her as a beneficiary. So even though she funded half his company, she has no ownership stake. Nothing. And the quitclaim deed transferred her interest in the office property completely to David. She gets nothing back. Ever. The hallway tilted. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. "What about her inheritance rights?" Barbara asked. "Jessica's. Lawyer made sure those papers included provisions removing Margaret from any future family trusts or estate plans. If anything happens to David, everything goes to Jessica and the baby. Margaret's cut out completely." "That's brilliant. Cold, but brilliant." "Jessica's been planning this since before the wedding," Patricia said proudly. She knew Margaret was the type who'd hand over everything if her son asked. So she convinced David his mother was too controlling, too involved. She made him believe cutting her out was about setting healthy boundaries. The idiot actually thinks this was his idea. I slid down the wall, my legs finally giving out. I sat on the cold hospital floor, my whole body shaking. They'd stolen from me, manipulated me, used my love for my son as a weapon against me. And David, my precious boy, had helped them do it. This wasn't just about meeting the baby. This was about erasing me entirely. I don't know how long I sat on that cold hospital floor tucked behind the plant, listening to Patricia's footsteps fade away. Time stopped meaning anything. Nurses walked past without seeing me. A doctor rushed by. Families came and went, clutching balloons and stuffed animals. The world kept spinning while mine had completely shattered. Eventually, I forced myself to stand. My knees cracked. My whole body felt ancient, brittle, like I might crumble into dust at any moment. I walked down the hallway in a daze, not sure where I was going, just knowing I couldn't stay there. I couldn't look at that closed door anymore. Couldn't see my son holding a child I'd never be allowed to touch. I found myself in the hospital chapel. It was empty, quiet, lit only by a few candles near the front. I collapsed into the back pew and the tears finally came. Not gentle crying, violent, body-shaking sobs that tore through me like a storm. I pressed my face into my hands and wept for everything I'd lost. The memories came flooding back, each one a fresh knife wound. I saw myself 20 years ago, standing in the kitchen of our old house at 2 a.m, still in my Denny's uniform. My feet were bleeding from standing all day. Robert had already been asleep for hours because he had to be at the construction site by 5. David's college tuition bill sat on the counter. $12,000 due in 2 weeks. I'd worked 16-hour days for months to earn that money. But when David came home for Christmas break and showed me his Dean's List certificate, the exhaustion had felt worth it. Worth it. I saw Robert on his deathbed, his hand gripping mine weakly. "Take care of our boy," he'd whispered. "He's going to do great things, Maggie. You make sure he remembers where he came from." I'd promised. I'd sworn I'd always be there for David, always support him, no matter what. I saw myself standing in front of the sold sign in my front yard, the house Robert and I had built our entire life in. 30 years of memories packed into boxes. I'd cried as the movers took my furniture, my garden tools, the bed where David had been conceived. But David needed that money for his business. "It's an investment in my future, Mom. Our future." $200,000, my entire retirement, my security, gone. And for what? So Jessica could mock me? So my own son could turn his back on me while I begged to hold my grandchild? I'd given them everything. My money, my time, my unconditional love. I'd worked until my body broke. I'd sacrificed every dream Robert and I had built together. I'd moved into a tiny apartment and pretended to be happy. I'd convinced myself that being a good mother meant giving until there was nothing left to give. And they'd taken it all. Deliberately. Calculated. They'd seen me coming from miles away. A lonely old widow desperate for purpose, desperate to feel needed, easy prey. I was a fool. A stupid, trusting fool. I pulled my knees to my chest right there in the church pew and rocked back and forth like a child. "I'm sorry, Robert." I whispered to the empty chapel. I failed. I let them take everything. I let them destroy what we built. I'm so sorry. The candles flickered. The silence pressed down on me. I felt invisible, erased, like I'd never mattered at all, like 68 years of existing had amounted to absolutely nothing. I had no grandson, no son, no money, no home, no dignity. I had nothing left. Nothing at all. I don't know how long I sat in that chapel, curled up and broken. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. Time had lost all meaning, but slowly, something began to shift inside me. It started as a tiny spark, barely noticeable at first, like a match struck in a dark room. I lifted my head and stared at the cross hanging at the front of the chapel. Robert's voice echoed in my memory, clear as day. It was from years ago, when our neighbor had tried to cheat us out of property line footage for his fence. I'd wanted to just let it go, avoid confrontation. But Robert had looked at me with those steady brown eyes and said, "Maggie, being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes you have to stand up and fight for what's right. Otherwise, people will walk all over you your whole life." I'd stood up to that neighbor. We'd gotten our property back. Robert had been proud of me. What would he think of me now, crying in a church while the people who stole from me celebrated upstairs? The spark grew warmer, brighter. I thought about David as a little boy, maybe 7 years old, coming home from school with a bloody nose. An older kid had been bullying him for weeks, taking his lunch money. "What did you do?" I'd asked, cleaning his face. "I hit him back," David said, chin trembling but eyes defiant. "You taught me not to let people hurt me, Mom." I'd hugged him tight and told him I was proud. I'd taught him to fight back. When had I forgotten my own lesson? The warmth in my chest spread, transforming into something hotter, sharper, anger. I wasn't just some helpless, old woman. I was Margaret Peterson. I'd raised a child alone after my husband died. I'd worked 2 jobs and never complained. I'd survived poverty, grief, and loneliness. I'd built a life from nothing. I was stronger than this, and I was only 68 years old. I had good years left. I wasn't dead yet. I wiped my tears roughly with the back of my hand and stood up. My legs were steadier now. The chapel didn't seem so dark anymore. I walked to the front and lit a candle, watching the flame dance and grow. "Robert," I whispered, "I'm not giving up. Not anymore. They want to erase me. They picked the wrong woman." I pulled out my phone and stared at it. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, determined. I had decisions to make. First, I needed to know exactly what I'd signed. Every single document. I needed copies, legal advice, someone who could tell me if there was any way to fight this. They thought I was just a naive old woman who'd roll over and disappear quietly. They thought I'd be too embarrassed to fight back, too scared to make waves. They were counting on me staying silent and broken. They were wrong. Jessica had manipulated my son. She'd poisoned him against me, turned him into someone I didn't recognize. Patricia had orchestrated this theft like it was a game. And David, my own flesh and blood, had betrayed every value I'd ever taught him. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. I walked out of that chapel with my head held high. My tears were gone. My grief had transformed into something powerful and focused. I didn't know exactly how I was going to fight back yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. And I was going to make sure they regretted the day they ever decided to cross Margaret Peterson. I had lost a battle today, but I wasn't going to lose the war. I left the hospital and drove straight home, not to cry, not to collapse, to plan. I walked into my apartment and went directly to my filing cabinet, pulling out every document David had ever asked me to sign. Bank statements, property papers, business agreements. I spread them across my kitchen table and stared at them with fresh eyes. I'd been blind before, trusting. Now I was going to see everything clearly. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting in the waiting room of Morrison & Associates, a law firm downtown. I'd found them through a Google search for elder financial abuse attorneys. The reviews were excellent. I clutched a folder containing copies of every document I could find. A sharp-looking woman in her 50s called my name. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm Linda Morrison. Please, come in." I followed her into a clean, professional office and sat down. My hands were steady as I placed the folder on her desk. "I need to know if I've been defrauded by my son and daughter-in-law." Linda's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. "Tell me everything." I did. Every detail. The money I'd given David, the documents I'd signed without reading, the hospital confrontation, Patricia's phone conversation about the property transfer and business restructuring. Linda took notes, her pen moving quickly across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. "May I see the documents?" I pushed the folder across the desk. She spent 15 minutes reading through everything, occasionally making small sounds of disapproval. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Peterson, you signed a quitclaim deed transferring any property interest in your son's commercial building to him exclusively. You also signed documents removing yourself as a beneficiary from the business you helped fund with $200,000. And you signed estate planning papers that effectively disinherit you from any future family trusts." Each word was a hammer blow, but I didn't flinch. "Can I fight it?" Linda leaned forward. "Did they explain what you were signing? Did they give you time to review the documents? Did you have independent legal counsel?" "No. David told me they were just formalities. tax paperwork. He rushed me through the signatures while I was making dinner. The whole thing took maybe 10 minutes. Linda's smile was predatory. Then yes, Mrs. Peterson, we can absolutely fight this. This is textbook undue influence and potentially fraud. Your son had a fiduciary duty to fully disclose what you were signing, especially given the amount of money involved and your age. The fact that they deliberately misrepresented the documents and pressured you creates grounds for legal action. Hope flickered in my chest. What do we do? We build a case. I need you to gather every piece of evidence you can find. Text messages, emails, bank statements showing the $200,000 transfer, phone records, anything that shows the timeline of events and their behavior toward you. I can do that. Good. And Mrs. Peterson, I want you to do something else. Linda opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small device. This is a digital voice recorder. It's completely legal in this state to record conversations you're part of. I want you to document everything from this point forward. If they contact you, record it. If you have a meeting with them, record it. I took the recorder, feeling its weight in my palm, a weapon disguised as a simple tool. There's one more thing, Linda said. I think we should request a family meeting. Tell them you want to discuss the situation, that you're ready to accept things and move forward. Make them think you're defeated. But I'm not defeated. Exactly. That's when people get careless. They'll say things, admit things, and we'll have it all on record. I smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd just found her weapon. When do we start? Right now. 3 days later, I sent David a text message. My hands were steady as I typed, the voice recorder sitting on my kitchen table like a silent promise. David, I'd like to meet with you and Jessica to discuss everything. I want to understand the situation and move forward peacefully. Can we talk at your house this Saturday? Please. I just want closure. The reply came within an hour. Okay, Mom, Saturday at 2 p.m. Linda had coached me carefully. You need to appear defeated, she'd said. Compliant. Like you've accepted your fate. That's when they'll get comfortable. That's when people make mistakes. Saturday arrived cold and gray. I dressed carefully in a simple blue cardigan and slacks. Nothing threatening or aggressive. I looked like exactly what they expected. A harmless old woman who'd been put in her place. I slipped the voice recorder into my purse, pressed record, and practiced my defeated expression in the mirror. I could do this. I arrived at David's house at exactly 2 o'clock. Jessica's parents' car was already in the driveway. Of course they'd be there. They'd want to witness my surrender. I rang the doorbell, clutching a folder of documents Linda had prepared. Copies. I'd kept all the originals locked in Linda's office safe. David opened the door. His eyes were wary, guilty. He couldn't quite meet my gaze. Hi, Mom, come in. The living room felt like a courtroom. Jessica sat on the couch, her mother Patricia beside her, both wearing expressions of barely concealed satisfaction. Jessica's father, Frank, stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. David hovered nervously near the kitchen entrance. Thank you all for agreeing to meet, I said softly, sitting in the armchair they'd left for me. The recording device in my purse captured every word. I know things have been difficult. I just want to understand what happened so I can move forward. Patricia's smile was thin and victorious. We appreciate you being reasonable about this, Margaret. It shows maturity. I nodded meekly, playing my part perfectly. Before I sign anything else or agree to any terms, I thought we should review what I've already signed, just so I understand my situation clearly. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. That's not really necessary. What's done is done. Oh, I know, I said, keeping my voice gentle and defeated. I just want to make sure I understand everything correctly. For my own peace of mind. You can understand that, can't you? David finally spoke, his voice strained. Mom, maybe we should just move forward. Looking backward doesn't help anyone. I'm not trying to cause problems, sweetheart. I promise. I opened my folder slowly, deliberately. I just want to review the property transfer, the business documents, and the estate planning papers. Can someone explain exactly what I signed? The room grew tense. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. Frank exchanged a glance with Jessica. They were suspicious now, wondering if this was a trap. But their greed made them overconfident. You signed standard legal documents, Patricia said coolly. Transferring property rights and clarifying business ownership structures, nothing unusual. And I have no claim to the $200,000 I gave David for the business? Jessica's jaw tightened. That was a gift, Margaret. You can't take back gifts. Of course not. I'm just clarifying. I kept my expression neutral, innocent. And the estate planning documents? The ones that remove me from any future family trusts? David's face went pale. Mom, where are you going with this? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. No one was expecting visitors. David looked confused. Who's that? I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I invited someone. I thought we should have a witness to this conversation. Jessica's eyes went wide with alarm. What? Who did you invite? David opened the door, and there stood Nurse Patricia from the hospital. Not Jessica's mother, the nurse who'd witnessed my humiliation in that hospital corridor. The real Patricia stepped forward, her face professional and serious. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, looking directly at me, but Mrs. Peterson asked me to come. There's something this family needs to hear. The room erupted into chaos. What is this? Jessica shot to her feet, her face flushed with anger. David, get her out of here. But Nurse Patricia didn't move. She looked at me with something like respect, then turned to face David and Jessica. I'm here because I witnessed something at the hospital that's been bothering me for days. And when Mrs. Peterson called and told me what's been happening, I knew I had to speak up. You have no right to be here, Jessica's mother hissed. This is a private family matter. It became my business when it involved a patient's medical care, Patricia replied firmly. She turned to David, her expression serious. Mr. Peterson, did your wife tell you that your son has a genetic condition? David's face went white. What? What condition? Your son has a clotting disorder that traces through your mother's bloodline. It's called Factor V Leiden. The pediatrician identified markers during the newborn screening and requested your mother's complete medical history to assess the severity and plan treatment. My hand flew to my mouth. I'd been tested for Factor V Leiden years ago after Robert's sister died from a blood clot. I was a carrier. I'd told David about it when he was 18, made sure he knew for his own health records. Jessica, Patricia continued, her voice steady and damning. I was standing at the nurse's station when Dr. Reynolds asked you to contact your mother-in-law for her medical records. Do you remember what you said? Jessica's face had gone from flushed to pale. I don't know what you're talking about. You said, and I quote, I don't care about the medical history. I'm not letting that woman anywhere near my family. If the baby has a condition, we'll deal with it ourselves. Don't contact her. David turned to Jessica, horror spreading across his face. You knew? You knew the baby might have a medical condition and you didn't tell me? You refused to get my mother's medical history? It's not a big deal, Jessica stammered, backing away. Lots of babies have minor conditions. I was going to tell you. When? David's voice was rising, cracking with emotion. When were you going to tell me that our son might have a blood clotting disorder? When were you going to tell me that you deliberately withheld medical information that could help him? Your mother didn't need to be involved, Jessica shouted. She's suffocating, David. I was protecting our family from her. By risking our son's health? David looked like he'd been slapped. Jessica's mother stood up. Now wait just a minute. Jessica was just trying to establish boundaries. No. I stood up, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. All eyes turned to me. I reached into my purse and pulled out the voice recorder, holding it up for everyone to see. She was trying to steal from me. and I have proof." The room went silent. "I've been recording this entire conversation," I said calmly. "Just like I recorded the conversation I overheard at the hospital, Patricia. The one where you bragged about how you'd manipulated my son into signing documents that stole my money and erased me from my own family." Jessica's mother's face drained of color. "You were eavesdropping? I was sitting in a public hallway while you loudly discussed your conspiracy to defraud me." I looked at each of them in turn. "You talked about the property transfer, the business documents I signed without understanding. How easy it was to trick me because I trusted my son. You laughed about it." David stared at his mother-in-law, then at Jessica. What is she talking about? I pulled out a second item from my purse. Legal documents stamped with Linda Morrison's law firm letterhead. I'm talking about fraud, undue influence, elder financial abuse. And I have a lawyer who agrees with me. I placed the papers on the coffee table. These are copies of everything I signed, along with a legal analysis of how you manipulated me into surrendering my rights to the $200,000 I gave you, the property I helped you buy, and my own inheritance rights. The silence that followed was deafening. David picked up the legal documents with shaking hands and began to read. With each page, his face transformed from confusion to shock to horror. Jessica tried to grab the papers from him, but he pulled away. "You told me these were routine business documents," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You said Mom understood everything she was signing. You said she wanted to gift me the money with no strings attached." "David, I can explain. You made me steal from my own mother." His voice cracked into a shout. "You made me betray the woman who gave me everything. She sold her house for me, Jessica. The house where I grew up, where my father died, and you made me take it all from her." Jessica's father stepped forward. "Now, son, let's all calm down and get out." David's voice was cold, completely unlike him. "All of you, get out of my house right now." "David, you're being irrational," Jessica's mother said sharply. "We were trying to protect you from what? From my mother's love? From her generosity?" David's hands were fisted at his sides. "You manipulated me. You poisoned me against her. You made me believe she was controlling when all she ever did was support me." He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I let them get in my head and I forgot who you are. I forgot everything you sacrificed for me." I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it was okay. But it wasn't okay. Not yet. "David, I appreciate your apology, but words aren't enough anymore." Jessica grabbed his arm. "David, you're not seriously going to side with her over your own wife?" He pulled away from her like she'd burned him. "You lied to me about our son's health condition. You made me complicit in stealing from my mother. I don't even know who you are anymore." Within 2 weeks, the legal machinery began to grind. Linda filed lawsuits for fraud, undue influence, and elder financial abuse. The recordings I'd made were submitted as evidence. Jessica's parents, realizing they could face conspiracy charges and potential jail time, immediately hired lawyers and tried to distance themselves from the situation, claiming they'd only been advising their daughter. The courts moved surprisingly quickly. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, was not sympathetic to Jessica's claims of establishing boundaries. She reviewed the evidence, listened to the recordings, and her verdict was swift and decisive. The property transfer was reversed. David was ordered to repay the $200,000 with interest, totaling $247,000. The business documents were voided, and I was reinstated as a co-owner with full beneficiary rights. Jessica's parents faced civil penalties for their role in the conspiracy. Their reputation in their social circles crumbled when word spread about what they'd done. David and Jessica's marriage didn't survive. The trust was broken beyond repair. Within 3 months, they'd filed for separation. David moved into a small apartment, devastated and ashamed. But there was one bright spot in all the darkness. 2 months after the legal resolution, I sat in my new apartment, a nicer place I'd purchased with part of the settlement money. The doorbell rang and I opened it to find David standing there, holding a baby carrier. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know I don't deserve this, but I'd like you to meet your grandson. His name is Robert, after Dad. I should have asked your permission to use that name, but I wanted to honor the man who would be ashamed of who I became." I looked down at the sleeping baby, my husband's name, my grandson. Tiny fingers curled into fists, Robert's nose, David's mouth, my family continuing. "Come in," I said softly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. I'd fought for my dignity and won. I'd stood up when they tried to erase me. And now, finally, I was holding my grandson in my arms, in my own home, on my own terms. I'd lost so much, but I'd gained something more important, myself. 6 months have passed since that confrontation in David's living room. I'm sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Baby Robert is asleep in the nursery I've set up, the same rocking chair I'd refinished now gently creaking as I push it with my foot. The yellow blanket I knitted is draped over the side, finally being used the way I'd always imagined. Life didn't return to the way it was before. It couldn't. Too much had been broken, but in many ways, what I have now is better. It's built on truth instead of blind trust, on respect instead of manipulation, on boundaries instead of endless sacrifice. David visits twice a week with Robert. Our relationship is different now. There's a formality to it, a carefulness. He's working hard to rebuild what he destroyed, attending therapy, taking responsibility for his choices. I appreciate his efforts, but I've learned something crucial. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about moving forward with your eyes wide open. Jessica and I have no relationship. The divorce was finalized last month. She fought for full custody but lost when the judge reviewed the evidence of her deception regarding Robert's medical condition. David has primary custody, and I have legally established grandparent visitation rights. No one can take that away from me again. I've also done something I never expected. I started a support group at St. Mary's Church for elderly parents who've been financially abused or emotionally manipulated by their adult children. We meet every Thursday evening. There are 12 of us now, and the stories I hear break my heart. But watching these people find their voices again, watching them stand up for themselves, gives me a purpose I didn't know I needed. Mrs. Chen from my old building joined the group last month. Her son had been stealing her Social Security checks. She's pressing charges now. She's 79 years old and she's found her courage. If there's one thing I want people to understand from my story, it's this. Being a good parent doesn't mean being a doormat. Love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's self-destruction. Your children can love you and still hurt you. Family can betray you more deeply than strangers ever could. And when that happens, you have every right to protect yourself, to fight back, to demand justice. I spent 68 years believing that sacrifice was the highest form of love. That giving until you had nothing left made you noble. That trusting blindly made you good. I was wrong. Real love requires respect, honesty, and reciprocity. When only one person is giving and the other is taking, that's not family. That's exploitation. Greed can poison even the closest relationships. It turned my son into someone I didn't recognize and nearly destroyed me in the process. But I refused to be erased. I refused to disappear quietly into the background like they expected. And because I fought back, I'm still here, stronger, wiser, free. To anyone watching this who's going through something similar, you are not alone. You are not stupid for trusting. You are not selfish for wanting justice. You have value, you have rights, and you deserve to be treated with dignity, no matter how old you are. Now I want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know experienced something like this? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back or walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more powerful real-life stories about courage, justice, and survival. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're stronger than we think. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you are never too old to fight for yourself. You are never too broken to rebuild. And you are never, ever alone. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.